All right, guys, we got a fun stream today. We're going to be joined by, as I bring him in now, current recruiting coordinator and not only a good friend of mine, but a former coaches with Georgia Tech, but current recruiting coordinator for Kent State, Zeke Pinkham. So, Zeke, thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, while we give some people a little bit of time to kind of join, I wanted to go over, just read a little bio about you. Obviously, you've got some accolades. You've done some stuff in college baseball now. So I figured, give credit where credit's due. As hard as that is for me to say, we're going to do it. So, Zeke was hired this summer to take over the recruiting coordinator role at Kent State. Pinkham comes to Kent State from Georgia Tech, where he served as an assistant coach for the past 5 seasons under former Kent State skipper Danny Hall. Pinkham worked primarily with catchers in addition to his assistant coach duties. He helped Kevin Parada win the Buster Posey Award and Johnny Bench catching awards before becoming a first-round draft pick. In his 5 seasons in Atlanta, Georgia Tech won 30-plus games in 4 full seasons and made 3 NCAA regionals. Prior to Georgia Tech, Pinkham was a graduate assistant at his alma mater, Louisville. There he worked with the catchers and mentored future number 1 overall pick Henry Davis and second-round selection Dalton Rushing. He was a 4-year member of the Cardinals baseball team, starting in 59 games at catcher from 2016 to 2019. During his 4-year career, the Cardinals made 2 Men's College World Series in 2017 and 2019. Pinkham captained the 2019 squad while hitting .324 in 41 games, including 33 starts. So obviously, Zeke, you've done one thing in your career that I haven't. You got to play in the College World Series, and you got to do it multiple times. But before we get into all the recruiting changes and all the stuff that's gone on, and obviously we'll have questions from people in the chat as well. But to start it off, obviously, you played the game at a high level at one of the best programs in the country at Louisville. You've had the opportunity really to learn under. If people don't consider Dan McDonnell a legend, he will be by the time his career is over, right? His coaching career is on that trajectory with what he's done at Louisville and in his entire career, and then under Danny Hall. So how have those two guys affected the way you coach now that you're away from him?
Yeah, great question. Both those guys are so unique in how they approach everything. I got to see, 2 different sides of it. Playing for Mac at Louisville, I got to play for him, and then I got to coach with him for a year as a graduate assistant. So I got to see 2 different sides of him,
Sure.
Which was really cool. When you're playing for someone that demands a lot of you, and then see the coaching side of him, and you're like, holy crap, this guy's really cool, actually. So you get to see that side of him, and then working for Coach Hall, who you played for, was awesome as well, man. Both those guys just are relentless competitors. They're relentless at recruiting, and they're always working towards one thing, which is going towards Omaha. And you don't have much longevity in this profession if that isn't your goal. And both those guys obviously are 2 of the best to ever do it. They're always working towards Omaha, building relationships, recruiting. I mean, both those guys have won at a really high level.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Dan McDonnell is going to be a Hall of Fame coach with what he's already done in his career. So you've had a big impact on, as I read, I mean, Kevin Parada, first-round pick out of Georgia Tech. You got to work with him for, I think, his whole career. Mm-hmm. You got to work with Henry Davis at Louisville, Dalton Rushing. So when you're working with those guys, what stuff on the defensive side are you really drilling down to them?
I think as a coach, especially on the catching side of things, man, you got to find what makes those guys tick. And not just that, you got to find what makes them comfortable. You got to put them in a position to have success. Those 3 guys were so unique and different in each way. You look at Henry. Henry had one of the best arms behind the plate I've ever seen. And, I mean, he caught, I don't know, probably 60, 70 games in the big leagues this year. Yeah. And has a rifle for an arm. One thing he had to get better at was, just receiving, the blocking side of things. But one thing he always had was the arm strength. And he had the leadership qualities, man. That guy could really lead. He was really tough, which is definitely a tool that most catchers need. Actually, all catchers need. He had that, and then you had Dalton. Dalton was a big, thick dude, still is. He's in AAA. He's having a really good minor league career so far. But one thing that he did that stood out to me is he was really athletic, which was very similar to Parada. Both those guys are really athletic. They were really able to move laterally. They, had really good hands, where one was a good receiver when he first got there, and then you had Kevin, who needed to work on receiving, who just got better and better as his career has gone on. But the three things that those guys all had in common was work ethic. Man, those guys just straight up got after it on a daily basis, as they knew they had a lot of potential and they knew they had an opportunity to, make a lot of money in this game. And all three of those guys have really capitalized on that.
100%, 100%. So one question from a guy he's the most valuable chatter whenever I do these, Zeke. So Canes, unfortunately, Zeke, he's a Miami Hurricanes guy. He's a Miami Hurricanes fan. Question to Coach Pinkham: how did your process change? And remember, Canes, he just took over the recruiting role at Kent, but he was, obviously involved in recruiting at Georgia Tech. How did your process change from August 1st last season in 2023 with the new rules to now, 2024 August 1st, where some places are getting increased scholarships but less spots?
So I'll say it like this: each program is going to be different depending on the type of support that you have from your athletic department and how much money you're able to fundraise. I can't speak on every single school, but some schools are going to be more fortunate than others to have more scholarships. I'll say like this: with the rosters going from 40 to 34, there aren't going to be many schools, if any, that are going to be at 34 full scholarships. So
sure,
you're going to have to be strategic on divvying that up. Now, some schools are going to have more, like, we have a goal. Let's say our goal is to get to 18, 19 scholarships. That's a lot of scholarships, a lot of money we had to fundraise and get support from. But that could be a goal. And if we get that, that'll help a lot of student athletes get more funding, be able to pay for things, stuff like that. So it's changed the recruiting aspect in a bunch of different ways. Not only the scholarships going up, but the rosters going down. You're no longer building rosters for necessarily the future. You're building it 1 year at a time. So we're in an age of, transfer portal, NIL. It's just, a lot of moving parts that you just got to stay flexible, especially in the coaching industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like before the portal and NIL and all this stuff, and now with the increased roster size or the decreased roster size, higher scholarship numbers people are allowed to do, you used to be building a roster for the future, right? You'd bring in freshmen and think he may not play his freshman year, but sophomore year or junior year, he could be a guy for us. Safe to say you're not really thinking like that anymore, Zeke?
Without a doubt. Obviously you still want to recruit young guys and have a foundation. Now that foundation for us is mostly just, you want to find good arms and develop them. We're very fortunate here at Kent State to have a really good pitching coach in Mike Birkbeck. He's been a staple here since 2004. We've won a lot of games, and we don't win that without really good pitching. So we feel like we have a really good system for developing young arms. So therefore, in the 26th class so far, we already have 3 guys committed that are pitchers, 2 lefties and a righty. So, we're being very strategic on how we're going about recruiting young guys. It's no longer, let's just add 10 young guys and develop them when they get here. It's like, no, what do we really need when that time comes? Obviously, we're really going to need pitching. We're going to need guys that are athletic, that can play the middle of the field and things like that. So you're looking at it at a completely different landscape than in years past, where it's like, oh, this kid's pretty good. He's from Ohio. Let's add this kid. That's not really the case anymore.
Okay. And I don't like the more I've been thinking about it, you're down to 34 roster spots. Is 17, if your school can get to 17 scholarships where you can give essentially, depending on how you spread it out, but you could potentially give every kid a 50% scholarship athletically. And then with academic, a lot of kids probably can get close to almost 100% stuff paid for. Mm-hmm. At least for the mid-major level, is that kind of the gold standard? You get to 17, obviously you get as much as you can, but if you can get to 17, you can compete with pretty much anybody.
Absolutely. I think you said right there, just get to as much as you can. I think if you're able to get to a number around 17, 18, you're going to put yourself in a really good spot. And if you're at a school that can, stack that money, you're in a really, really, really good spot. So like I said earlier, it's just a lot of moving parts, and you just got to stay flexible because each year is bringing something different. It's the 40 to 34, 18 scholarships. Well, if we have 18 scholarships for a year, 17 scholarships for a year, are we going to have that next year? Is it going to change? It's just, you just got to stay flexible.
Yeah. So, a lot of the stuff that I talk about, Zeke, and we'll get to some questions here in a little bit. A lot of the stuff I've been saying recently is recruiting is just, I think the best thing I read was it's decades worth of changes in 1 year. Mm-hmm. Right. So a lot of it is you guys that are in the recruiting world, I mean, you're trying to react, and then you're kind of waiting as well to like, all right, well, what are they going to come up with next? And we know with a lot of these changes, we're not going to hear fine print until maybe March or April. But about this new roster set date for next year on December 1st, what were your first kind of reactions to that when it came out?
It gives you more clarity on what's coming. You as a recruiting coordinator, you're kind of worried because it's like, do we have to be at 34 on August 1st or first day of class, or do now we have clarity that we have to be at 34 on December 1st? So it kind of gives you more an idea on planning, on what you can add and what you can't add. So that's nice. But the thing is still scary, man. Like, you get to 34 on December 1st and you're in scrimmages in early February and you got a guy that blows out. And now I'm starting the season with 33 guys. That doesn't make much sense to me. And I think that puts a lot of programs at a massive disadvantage. As you've been in college baseball a while, I've been in college baseball a while. Injuries happen. It's part of the game.
Yeah. And one happening in this early spring, that's like best case scenario, right? Like,
exactly.
It could be worst case scenario. You get 5 guys go down, and then what do you do?
Exactly. It's not like the minor leagues where you can't just go down to AAA or AA and pick up a guy. It's not like that. So I think that, we got to come up with a better system for the future. And, I don't know what that looks like or what it's going to entail, but, you're just putting a lot of people at risk by having that 34 drop dead date at December 1st, because, obviously with injuries, and the most common type of injuries you're going to get is on the pitching side of things, because it's just how it is.
100%.
You lose a weekend guy preseason, you're probably going to lose other guys. Other guys are going to have to pick up the slack. There's not enough guys and not enough innings to go around. So, it's just a lot of moving parts, like we said, and you said it best right there. Decades worth of change in 1 year. You got a lot dropped on us recently.
Yeah.
You just, like I said, you just got to stay transparent. You got to stay flexible, and you just got to be prepared for anything.